What's up everybody, Dan here. Today I'm going to teach you how to turn your charcoal grill into a smoker. Now I've got my chicken and I actually spatchcocked it. Second time I've ever done that. It's very rewarding to do, so if you ever want to do that, I highly recommend it. It's really not that hard either. And then in terms of the seasoning I have on there, I wish I could tell you, but I basically, over this entire summer, have tried a whole bunch of different barbecue rubs, and this is a compilation of all of them. Which it tastes pretty good, but I figure at this point it's the end of summer, so don't need to be making more barbecue seasoning. So just want to let you know what I'm smoking and you know exactly why. So let's go ahead, let's go out to the grill. All right, so I got my chimney filled with, you know, just regular old briquettes, whatever you prefer. You know, if you prefer the lump, doesn't really, you know, super matter. And I have it filled up to, you know, 3/4 of the way. Because we're smoking, we don't need as much heat, and we're gonna add to it as we go here. So we don't need a ton of briquettes. We just wanna make sure that we get them going and that they're on fire. So that's essentially what I'm gonna go ahead and do here, is just light up my paper, get that fire going. And weather is not particularly great today, which is not a big deal. You still can do this in the rain. It just might be a little bit more difficult. You might not want to do it in the rain, but I've done it in rain, snow, all the elements. So I'm gonna go ahead, we're gonna let this get going, and then we'll be back to throw the chicken on. All right, so you can see I got a really nice flame going. Looking inside, all my coals are pretty much ready. A couple on the top aren't. It's not a big deal. So basically what I'm going to go ahead and do is if you've got these baskets, awesome. I say extremely helpful. And those are what's really going to keep your coals in line. And I like to put the coals on the side of the grill that's got the hood. And the reason being is I tend to hit my chicken or whatever I'm cooking with the grill and if it's on this side. So I like to keep it away from the hood. So I'm just gonna go ahead, I'm gonna pour these in. And I'm gonna go ahead and put them all on this one side. And for the most part, I do want a little heat coming from the one side. And I'm gonna show you what that looks like in a second here. So if you take a look at what I just did, and you can see I've got the majority of my coals on half of the grill. I've got a little in that second grill grate, but not a lot. And it's just to get a little bit of heat towards the center of that grill. And so I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put the grate back on, I'm gonna let that heat up, and then we'll be back with my chicken. All right, so my grill's hot. So just a couple quick things. I also cleaned it off too. I have a little temperature gauge here to gauge how hot it is. Now, I don't put it over the coals. I want to know what it is in the cool section of the grill. The reason being is you want it to hang around anywhere between 225 to 275. So that's why I keep that there as opposed to over the coals. Because if it's starting to get cold over here, that means it's not hot enough on the back half of the grill. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna take that lid off. Oh, and the other thing I also have here before I forget, I do have a thermometer that I plugged into here to know when my chicken is done. You know, not necessary, but you know, just one of those things that I knew I was gonna be doing a lot of, I invested in. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm just gonna take my spatchcock chicken and I'm just gonna lay it right over the grill. Now, when doing this, I basically put half of it on there, and I'll go ahead and show you this. And I put one half onto the hot side of the coals. This is going to get rotated eventually, so don't worry about it being closer to the hot part of the coals than the not hot part. So the other thing, cap this back up before I lose too much heat as well. The only other thing you really need to know is I'm not going to start putting wood chips or pellets on yet. And I'm going to do a wood chip today, but I've used both wood chips and pellets. One is not better than the other. I prefer pellets with an actual smoker, wood chips for something like this, or wood chunks. But yeah, basically we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna let that chicken cook a little bit before I start putting any wood chips on. All right, so I just rotated my chicken and say I'm now gonna spray it and say to keep it just moist. You should be spraying it anywhere between every 30 minutes to an hour, and I'm pretty liberal. You can see that I'm spraying it down pretty good here. So don't be afraid to, and I say coals are definitely still looking good. I'm saying at this point, I'm gonna add my wood chips. Because it's been raining, my wood chips are actually already wet, but I do recommend soaking them. I'm just gonna go ahead and put a handful in, and pretty much what's gonna happen is it's gonna start to smoke up. And so you can see it's already starting to smoke. I'm gonna get that covered back up. Now this is the important part, is we wanna pay attention to basically our thing that, you know, vents it out. And I say I actually close it up about halfway to keep that smoke inside of it. And at this point, we're gonna go ahead and just let it do its thing. It's been about a half hour. I'm gonna go ahead and put some more wood chips in there. Reason being is they weren't as wet as I maybe thought they were. Smoke didn't last nearly as long. Not a super big deal whatsoever, and I'm actually getting almost to the point where I do need to add some more charcoal, and I say that'll happen definitely the next time that we come out here. So it's going to be a twofer, putting those wood chips back in there, get them started back up, and we're also going to spray it again. At this point, because we got that nice crust on it already, can't spray it enough. And if you don't want that dry meat, make sure you keep spraying it as well. But it's coming along nicely. I'm trying to get 175 on it, and we're getting there. We're about 155 right now. So, and we'll talk about once we sort of get there what the next strategy is from there. But I'm gonna say we'll get that smoke going again, and so you can see it's coming out a little bit slower than it was last time, lit right up before, but not a big deal. All right, so we just started hovering a hair under 250. So I'm gonna open up my vents back up a little bit to add some charcoal in. And it's looking real good. Where am I at in temperature? So we're still doing good on temperature, not overly worried about it, but I'm gonna go ahead. I'm just going to refeed basically my fire here, and that's just gonna get it hot again so we can continue the cooking process. I always do that to double check to make sure my coals are still going and it's not actually residual heat. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna add a couple more chips here, and I'm spraying again. Always spraying. I don't think I told you, apple cider. It's not apple cider vinegar, it's just regular old apple cider. It's delicious. Woo. Homemade too. And then we're gonna close that back up. Again, I'm gonna leave these vents open as well. And then I don't wanna put a ton of smoke on my chicken, to be quite honest. It's really just personal preference on how smoky you want it. I don't even think I'm gonna put barbecue sauce on this either. I think I'm just gonna leave it as is. But we're almost there. I'm gonna say I probably have one more batch of chips to put in, and then hopefully we're right at that desired temperature I wanna be at. All right, so I just put my last little bit of smoke on it, and in terms of temperature, I'm right there, and I know it's done. So at this point, I'm just going for smokiness, and you can see I've got a lot of smoke coming up and off right now. And just in general, if you take a look, just a lot of smoke coming up and off. And so it's looking pretty good. We're almost there, almost done. And I also sprayed it as well. And then next time you see me, we'll go ahead and take it off. All right, so my timer's about to go off, so I know it's done. So basically at this point you just pull it off, and like I said, if you wanted more smoke, and you just need to cool down the coals a little bit and create more smoke. I didn't want a ton of smoke on this. I like smoke flavor of things, but not overly done. And I'm not sure if you could see that as I was doing that, the one leg was about to fall off. But let's go ahead, let's show you what this bad boy looks like. All right, so, it looks burnt. It's not. That's the smoke just creating that darkness on the actual chicken. And so you don't have to actually worry about that. Other than that, it's perfect. Looks fantastic. As you can kind of see on the inside. Ooh, almost lost my chicken. Can kind of see under the wing there. But yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for in terms of my chicken. So we're all set. We're done. And that's how you turn your grill into a smoker.